As the mum of a teenage boy, I find it really upsetting to see that people will post content in some of the chats I'm in that make negative and discriminatory generalisations about men that would never be accepted if they were about women or minority groups. Marshall Rosenberg, who developed nonviolent communication, would call these sexist posts a language of domination or a language of judging what people are. The excuse that this type of reverse sexism is punching up doesn't satisfy me, as we are all victims of the patriarchal system that we have inherited. Women, men, and everybody else. Toxic generalisations about men that seem to be tolerated or even encouraged in mixed liberal circles in the West would include complaints that men won't commit, that the men in the dating pool are low quality, that men lack subtlety and sensitivity and are only interested in a narrow range of subjects, that men need to do much better, that men have a one-track mind and just want to have sex indiscriminately as often as possible. All these messages are damaging, but this last one is a particular recurring frustration, not just because it's plainly not true, but also because it has some very serious consequences. Firstly, it leads to men being taken less seriously when they report sexual harassment or assault. Secondly, it gives men a sort of get-out-of-jail-free card for sexual harassment. It's just my nature, and I was drunk. I remember being followed one night by a drunken guy who was alternately threatening and pleading with me to go back home with him, and "you know how guys are" was his excuse. Men are human beings. The Dalai Lama is a man, for goodness sake. Men might feel horny some of the time, or even often, but as human beings, they can use their awareness to make sure they don't act on it inappropriately. This is clear, and undermining men's humanity by likening them to beasts with no sexual control is a lie and a very damaging message. Perhaps the reason people don't take sexism against men seriously is because there's a large, well-regarded women's movement that most of us are involved in to some degree. But beyond a few influencers who want to ramp up the patriarchy and be allowed to dominate women, there isn't much of an established and respected movement advocating for men's issues. I'm a feminist. I strongly believe that a woman is a man's equal and that men and women should have equal opportunities with other non-binary people too. I'm angry about sexual harassment, which I have of course experienced, mostly from men, but occasionally also from women. I'm angry about sexual violence, which I've experienced at the hands of men and which I know is more often committed by men. I'm angry about intimate partner violence, and I know that the most dangerous of these physical assaults are committed by men. I'm angry at the gender pay gap and that women are severely underrepresented in governments and on boards of directors around the world. I'm angry that women are taking on more than their fair share of caregiving and housework, and that they are under pressure from society and the media to be young, beautiful, and really good at everything they do all the time. I'm a feminist. I can see the temptation to offload all this anger and frustration on men by assuming the worst of them, but I maintain that this is not the way that will lead us out of the patriarchal system and to a fairer, healthier world. The fact is that all human beings are flawed. There is not one single one of us that can look back over our lives and see that we have behaved impeccably at every moment. If men are doing more damage than women, it's because they have more power than women, both physically in their bodies and also due to their roles within society in this patriarchal system we have inherited. The fact that men have been raised within the patriarchy to swallow and ignore their emotions and appear strong and invulnerable at every moment, so that the powers that be can exploit them as uncomplaining workers and soldiers, almost certainly contributes to the extent of male violence. There's one thing that I can say for sure. A violent man is not a happy man. Therefore, Men are also victims of the patriarchal system. And while I'm on the subject of male violence, we hear a lot of talk about men killing women and putting them in hospital. There are marches and demonstrations about it, as well there should be. But which people are the most common fatal victims of male violence? Other men. More men than women are killed by male violence, but nobody's talking about it. Nobody's marching about it. It seems that nobody cares. Men have a plethora of other problems that should be a great cause for concern and compassion. They're more likely to commit suicide, to be incarcerated, to suffer from substance addiction, and to be homeless than women are. They live a good fewer years than women do, and this figure varies from country to country, so it's not something innate. They also reach lower educational attainment than women, in the West at least. But, I hear you say, men have so much more privilege than women. They're running the show, and some of them take advantage of their superior strength to dominate and abuse women. And statistics will tell you that you would be right about these things. But the truth, of course, is so much more complex. I had a lover for a while who told me that he used to get drunk and beat his wife regularly. He also told me that his father used to regularly beat him mercilessly as a child. The most entitled, selfish man I know is a tall white man with a posh voice and a good job who expects his wife to do all the heavy lifting when it comes to childcare, preparing meals, housework, planning, just about everything really. What an arsehole, you might say. There's a great example of male privilege, you might think. But it's not as simple as that. I can see the systemic advantages of being a tall, white, privately educated man, but I would not exchange places with this guy because I know the backstory. He doesn't have supportive friends. His parents are divorced, and he was raised in a dysfunctional family with alcohol problems and without reliable love and affection. He's affected by this to this day. When we see entitled or violent behaviour from anyone, I think we could be pretty sure that there's a background of neglect and abuse behind it. We might point our fingers at privileged, entitled men, but who are we to tally up another person's privileges? We're not going to heal the trauma and suffering in this world by demonising men, because as Frankie Goes to Hollywood say, when two tribes go to war, points is all you can score. When you're focused on scoring points, you are focusing on judging the other for being in some way less or for being wrong. And all that ever came out of that is hate, oppression, and violence. In our struggle to dismantle the patriarchy and heal our society, can we stop pointing the finger at men and instead reach out to them with compassion and goodwill? In our posts, can we follow the code of conduct which asks us to practice inclusivity and avoid being sexist and condescending? Rather than discriminating against anyone, can't we realise that each one of us is an individual case? But at the same time, we're all the same species. We're all part of the same ecosystem, and each and every one of us can benefit from finding more peaceful, more compassionate ways to heal our societies and move away from the culture of dominance and patriarchy with tolerance and understanding.